There are people on the internet right now telling you that seed oils are more dangerous than cigarettes, that they're the root cause of heart disease, cancer, obesity, basically every chronic disease you've ever heard of. And then there are others saying the whole panic is completely made up, that it's pseudoscience, that you're being manipulated by wellness influencers. So who do you believe? Hi, I'm the Nutty Professor. I'm a registered nurse with a medical science degree, and today I've gone through the actual peer-reviewed research on seed oils so you don't have to. Spoiler, the truth is more nuanced than either side wants you to know. Let's get into it. First, let's define what we're actually talking about. Seed oils are oils extracted from, you guessed it, seeds. We're talking canola, sunflower, soybean, corn, safflower, cottonseed, grapeseed, and rice bran oil. Critics sometimes call these the Hateful Eight. That name actually comes from the Joe Rogan podcast when he interviewed a carnivore diet advocate named Paul Saladino back in 2020. That's essentially where this modern moral panic around seed oils started. These oils are high in polyunsaturated fatty acids, PUFAS, particularly an omega-6 fatty acid called linoleic acid, and that's where the controversy really begins. Now, let me steelman the case against them because the concerns aren't completely without basis. Concern number one, the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. Here's the argument, and it's a biochemically reasonable one. Our bodies need both omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. Historically, humans ate roughly a 1-to-1 ratio of these two. In the modern Western diet, that ratio has blown out to somewhere between 10-to-1 and 20-to-1 in favor of omega-6. The concern is that omega-6 fatty acids can be converted in the body into compounds called pro-inflammatory eicosanoids. So the theory goes, more omega-6 equals more inflammation, and chronic inflammation is linked to virtually every major disease. That's the mechanism. It's not made up, it's real biochemistry. Concern number two, oxidation at high heat. Polyunsaturated fats are chemically unstable compared to saturated fats. When you heat them, especially repeatedly, they can oxidize and form compounds like aldehydes and lipid peroxides. One study found that when sunflower oil was heated 20 times to simulate a fast food fryer, pro-inflammatory markers in participants increased significantly. That's a legitimate finding. Concern number three, industrial processing. So some seed oils go through a heavily industrial extraction process involving solvents like hexane, high heat, and deodorizing. Critics argue this strips nutrients and introduces harmful compounds. Now, here's what the evidence actually shows. On inflammation, the evidence contradicts the theory. Here's where it gets really interesting. The biological mechanism sounds scary, but when researchers actually tested in humans, the results are very different. A 2024 review published in the British Journal of Nutrition, one of the most comprehensive looks at this topic, concluded that clinical trials show increased linoleic acid intake does not increase markers of inflammation or oxidative stress. In fact, some trials showed it actually reduced inflammation. The Framingham Offspring study, so one of the most well-known long-running cohort studies in public health, found the opposite of what the pro-inflammation theory predicts. Higher blood levels of omega-6 fatty acids were actually associated with lower inflammatory biomarkers. Why the disconnect? Researchers at Johns Hopkins explain it well. Somewhere along the way, the fact that omega-6 is less anti-inflammatory than omega-3 got twisted into the claim that omega-6 is pro-inflammatory. Those are two completely different things. On the cardiovascular disease front, the evidence is actually positive. A 2023 meta-analysis of 40 randomized controlled trials, that's the highest level of evidence we have, confirmed that higher dietary linoleic acid significantly reduces LDL cholesterol levels, especially when replacing saturated fat. And a large 2025 cohort study found that the highest intake of plant-based oils were associated with a 16% lower risk of total mortality. Meanwhile, the highest butter intake was associated with a 15% higher risk of dying. Those are significant numbers. The American Heart Association has actually warned that reducing omega-6 intake could increase, not decrease, cardiovascular disease risk. On the omega-6 to 3 ratio, it's more complicated than you think. The ratio argument sounds convincing, but here's the problem. Researchers at Stanford point out that the same ratio can be calculated from completely different absolute amounts of each fatty acid. It's not actually a useful metric on its own. The real message from researchers like Dr. Mark Lund at the Karolinska Institute isn't to eat less omega-6, it's to eat more omega-3. Eat fatty fish, walnuts, chia seeds. That's what moves the needle. On the heating concern, context is everything. Remember that study about heating oil 20 times? That simulates a commercial deep fryer that's been running all day. A 2022 meta-analysis found that heating seed oils below 200 degrees Celsius, which is normal home cooking, does not create significant levels of harmful compounds. The concern is about repeated industrial level frying, not stir frying at home. And on processing, the hexane used in extraction leaves only trace amounts in the final product, well within regulated safety limits. So here's my honest take as a nurse who has read the research. Seed oils are not the villain they've been made out to be. The clinical evidence does not support the idea that they cause inflammation, and it actually suggests they're beneficial for heart health when they replace saturated fats. But, and this is important, that doesn't mean all seed oil consumption is equal. The real issue is ultra-processed food. The problem isn't the canola oil you use to roast your vegetables. The problem is that seed oils are one of the primary ingredients in ultra-processed foods. The chips, the fast food, the packaged snacks. And it's those foods as a whole, the refined carbohydrates, the additives, the lack of fiber that are driving chronic disease, not the oil in isolation. The Australian Guide to Healthy Eating actually classes seed oil heavy processed foods as discretionary. Fine occasionally, but not a dietary staple. That's a reasonable position. My practical advice? Use seed oils for high heat cooking at home. They're fine. Olive oil or avocado oil are great everyday options too. Don't deep fry the same oil 20 times. Focus your energy on eating more whole foods, more fatty fish, more vegetables. That is what the evidence says moves the needle on chronic disease. Don't let fear of seed oil distract you from the bigger picture of your diet. If you found this helpful, subscribe, because every week I'm doing exactly this, taking the health topics people are confused and scared about, going through the actual evidence and giving you a straight answer. Next week, I'm going to be looking at lavender oil for sleep. Drop a comment below and let me know, are you team seed oil or are you cooking with butter and tallow? I genuinely want to know where you're at. See you next week.